Hello, scholars, and welcome to our second session in our M&E course. As you might be aware, we already looked at some concepts, but I think we just talked about a few concepts and we quickly went into the practical dimension of it. I hope that you are enjoying your baseline, and we looked at baseline, midline, and endline M&E. These are very important in every project intervention. So today we are going to topic number 2, which is on the ethics and challenges in monitoring and evaluating intervention projects. I think if you have been doing M&Es across the number of years, you agree with me that there are a lot of ethical issues, challenges that come with monitoring and evaluation. There are challenges, and there is even a high possibility of being compromised because there's money involved, and people may tell you to say, okay, tick this project as a success when it's actually a failure. Or say, oh, following this intervention, there's been a high productivity in goat milk, and then you go that direction. No, don't be bought or be sold, because we want to see real results for the project. So you agree with me that these are very critical issues when it comes to ensuring credibility and trustworthiness, validity of monitoring and evaluations. So ethical considerations are very critical. And when we're talking about the ethics, we are talking about what is right or wrong, what is bad and good, what are the bads and what are the goods. So the idea is we need to avoid the bads and embrace the goods when we are doing the monitoring and evaluation of projects. And it's very important to realize that being subject to biases and compromise is extremely higher when you're doing M&E, and that's why you need an independent person to do the M&E. Don't invite a friend, because a friend will start evaluating friendship instead of evaluating the project. So it's very important that we look at some of the ethical principles in monitoring and evaluation. The first and foremost is respect for persons. This is a very important dimension of ethics when you're doing monitoring and evaluation, because you're dealing with people. In most, if not all cases, there are people involved. In fact, the impact of any project can only be evaluated if it is transforming people's lives. Now, as you seek to transform people's lives, there is need for respect for people. So when you go to evaluate a project, you need to check, are people's cultural, social cultural fabrics respected? Were they respected? And as you go about collecting information, are you seeing the signs and elements that the people who were being assisted with a particular intervention were respected, and the interveners or the project implementers didn't just come to impose things that were contrary? And it's for this reason that baseline is very important, because in that process, you also engage with the key stakeholders. It is unethical to go and start implementing any project, however small, without first engaging the stakeholders. And I believe you are able to relate as you are trying to do the greening of the school of education. I would love to see how this goes. So if you mess up in the baseline, even in terms of identifying which stakeholders to work with, you may have a lot of challenges. So when you're looking at respect for persons, there are two principal attributes that are key. Number one is informed consent and confidentiality. People must consent, the community must consent that we need this. Otherwise, it cannot take off. Every intervention, you have to ask a question: did the people consent? Did the people acquire the ownership of that project? Did they accept it in their setting? That question must be answered. So if people do not consent, with the project or consent to the project, that is an ethical practice. And as M&E expert, take note of that as areas of inconsistencies, and you have to report back to the implementer and the funder. And if you see that there was gross misconduct, you can outrightly fail that project, and it can bring a lot of legal issues for lack of respect for people. I think if you are in the medical field, or for some of you who have passed through the medical field or public health background, you'll come to a realization that there are some medical interventions that tend to affect people very negatively. And you see that it may cause a lot of damage to those on whom it is being tested. So it's very important that if it's a medication, for example, it's been it's a kind of a trial, there is need to inform people and say this is a trial. You don't want to use it blindly. Sometimes they would say, oh no, we're going around to do this intervention and find that it's going to cause harm to the community that is involved. That is not acceptable. So make sure that you are critical on the issue of informed consent. Both you as a researcher or as an M&E expert, before you intervene with or engage with people, seek their consent to participate. At the same time, when they accept, ask, did the implementer of this project consent, or seek your consent? And if they say no, majority are saying no, make a very detailed trial of what really happened at the beginning. And you see that you're going to find a lot of interesting perspectives. There are people who say, no, this just came and there was no any proper stakeholder consultation. They didn't seek our consent. They entered into our community without seeking permission. That's very important. Secondly, under respect for person's confidentiality, which I already mentioned, make sure that when you collect information, people are giving you information. Sometimes, like I earlier mentioned, they may speak the truth, but you not go and say, no, Nasilele said ABCD, that you did ABCD. There are people who go to do the intervention that in the process they start proposing other people's wives, or they start abusing young girls or boys in a particular community. If you hear there were such reports, make sure that you do documentation, bring to the attention of the funders and also the implementers to check what social accountability, what guidelines did they follow in order to make sure that people's well-being socially and environmentally are protected. There are many projects that are contrary to people's social landscapes, and you don't want to allow such a thing to happen. So if you are the M&E expert or you are involved in a project, make sure you check that it is ethical. You don't want to go there to ask questions or do the interventions that are contrary to what people are used to. There must be some compatibility between people's own lives and what you're planning to do for their improvements. The idea is every project must bring the real benefit, and at this point I would love to take you to beneficence. So I've talked about respect for person, which must be manifested through informed consent and confidentiality, and then we go to beneficence. Beneficence, as the word implies, is what are the expected benefits? Number one, for the project that you are doing or that was done, are there benefits that are positive that would change people's lives, or the implementers merely came to make their own names and then eventually go and ask for more funding? That I've seen this happen in some instances where you see these private sectors, the NGOs and consultants firms, they see that, we are about to close the, what do? Okay, let's go to some institution, we get pictures, have meetings, and then get a picture together and then go and use this picture to say, we went. Yet you have gone there to unknowingly use people without real benefits in why are they even participating in this. So it's very important that the real benefits that will be accrued as a result of that intervention are probed. At the same time, people must be informed as you are doing collection of that M&E data. What are the potential benefits of them participating, giving you M&E responses? You can explain to them to say, you are going to gather this information to value or to assess, gauge the extent to which that intervention benefited them, such that if there are certain revelation you may be able to come back to the community and or inform the implementer to say there is this and that issue that came out, which you need to go back and rectify. So that way there will be an indirect benefit that will come when the people speak the truth. Because if they say all was well, you may find that maybe they are crediting the project that failed, and there could never be any other intervention, because not every failure must be used as negative, because there are some which can be used as a stepping stone for the next intervention. So beneficence must be very clear what direct or indirect benefits our participants are anticipating by participating in the M&E data collection process, and also in the interventions. Are there any benefits that have arisen since the beginning of the project? Are there benefits that are expected on their side by participating in the process of providing perspectives? So in the project that you're doing of greening the School of Education at the University of Zambia, or you may be in another university, you're doing a project, along the way you must come back to the people that you are targeting to benefit and find out, have they benefited? Remember, we talked about what's the difference between a stakeholder and a beneficiary. And we said that a beneficiary is always a stakeholder, but a stakeholder is not always a beneficiary. A stakeholder may just have a certain interest, but may not benefit, but they want to just see that succeed. But every beneficiary is already a stakeholder. You need to think about that. And then transparency and accountability. Again, this is another aspect that is very important, very critical to reflect upon, because usually you may be running in a project, you may be in a project, and you don't know what happens there. You don't know what is really happening. So it may be you as an individual, it may be members of the community where it was implemented. Was there proper transparency and accountability? Because if there's no transparency, I gave you one example of medication. Usually when they do the so-called placebos or dummy medicines, when there's a new drug on the market, you'll find that they will say, okay, we need to test this and see how do people behave. They will say, okay, it looks like Panadol, but it's not Panadol. They want to see how will every 10th person be reacting. And then from the reaction, they're able to make certain corrections. So you need to find out, was there transparency to tell the people that, or disclosure to say there is this and this and this that is hidden? Or if they say, oh no, there's immunization that is going to be going on. Is that real immunization, or there could be another hidden agenda? So you will not go to the community, you will not go into any institution and go to people, even animals, without first a transparent disclosures. What is the intention of doing what you're doing? If there is an hidden agenda, that is unethical, and you don't want to do that. As far as possible, you may be in a project where you may be a quality controller. Check out, are there any hidden agendas that people don't want to communicate, or implementers want to communicate to the community where they're going to implement the project? If there is any hidden agenda, bring this to their attention and make sure that you can actually stop or halt the project until there are certain ethical principles that are taken into consideration. There are many times when the researchers have complained, say, no, we are being used as research assistants and not equal researchers per se. This is very true. Sometimes they'll say, no, you are the principal investigator, you are the project lead. But that person you're collaborating with is just actually using you to get what they want from your community and then go with them somewhere else to do something totally different from the original intention. So you need to be on the lookout on these things, because in many cases we get compromised when you see a sack of money, but you need to probe, what is this sack of money for? How is it benefiting the people? And is there a real, or is there any hidden intention around this money that is being given out? That's very extremely important. And then apart from transparency and accountability, from the angle in which I've explained, ensure that you are very clear in your reporting, you are very clear in terms of stakeholder engagement. Ensure that a thorough stakeholder engagement is done so that at that level where you need to do the evaluation final, you are really very sure that every stakeholder was consulted. We don't want people to come and cry foul. Oh no, we are not involved. They only involve their friends or the chief or the director. The rest of us were not involved. We are just being used. We don't want to hear such kind of reports. And then the issue of bias and objectivity. Ensure that bias in data collection and analysis is avoided. Because bias, what I'm talking about is where you exaggerate the value or the meaning of the findings so that it appears always positive. But those who have a critical eye are actually able to see that these results are not really as expected because you are exaggerating. So present the results as they are based on the key outcomes of the project. Do not try to falsify them so that they appear to be positive when actually they are negative. Remember, negative results are also useful results. They can help to improve the practice of implementing projects and even doing M&E. And also subjectivity in interpretation of findings. Do not be subjective. Interpret the results as they are. The temptation is very high, especially if you have been hired and there's this push for you to really present the results from an only positive point of view. Remain firm. I know that there are instances where you say, then you never get another chance. Sometimes it's better you lose that popularity than to compromise the quality. At the end of the day, you find yourself compromised because you are given money. They will give you money for sure. One of these days, you may find yourself in a project where they do some offers so that you paint the results, you sugarcoat the results so that it appear, okay, this is positive, but yet money has been used. There has been this kind of social cash transfer. You remember back in the days? There was pressure. But you find that was not pushed so much. People would say, no, we already gave the intended beneficiaries, and then not knowing that money is being diverted and being used by different people. So you need to be critical, but at the same time, be ready sometimes to be put under serious troubles. You may even be cleared. I'm sorry to say this, but sometimes it may go to that direction. So this is how serious these issues of M&E are. It's like you're an auditor. So if you are too honest, sometimes people who are dishonest may plan evil against you. But God forbid that should happen, because you are trying to be very truthful and contribute to the development of a particular community, of the nation. But if you are falsifying and lying, sugarcoating, money has been stolen, it's in people's pockets, and then you say, no, we gave the intended beneficiaries, then that means you are also actually committing a crime. It's even a sin if you are looking at it from a spiritual point of view. So don't falsify, just tell the truth. And then also beware of power dynamics. Power dynamics are not something to play around with. Let's give one practical example. If you are in a company or in an institution, you may find that you report to a certain boss and you are the one who is supposed to do an M&E. You find that you are most likely to be biased because of the issue of power dynamics. These power dynamics may be in form of gender relations, male, female, age, qualifications. You need to be very careful with that you don't grade certain people with certain levels of qualification fairly, then others unfairly. Sometimes these come as a result of where somebody went. I'll give you one example. There are people who have certain stereotypes against certain universities, and you say, oh, if this was done by a certain university, this project, and I came from another university that is maybe considered to be higher than, I'll downgrade this other, and then I will actually inflate the positive dimension of the project for this other university that I prefer, or maybe where I graduated. These things happen. One of the examples I can give you, I will not mention, but I've been involved in a project where the M&E expert is coming from CBU and is evaluating a project which was done at the University of Zambia. And there is this fight. The M&E expert from the other side wants to downgrade the team of researchers from the University of Zambia, because he feels the University of Zambia is boastful. People from UNZA are boastful, and they want to show as if, or they want to portray themselves as if they are better than others. So there will be this psychological war that you need to be careful with, and sometimes may not be like that. It may be you are presenting maybe your project findings. They are good, but someone is just throwing stones. You need to be very careful, and you need to be very perceptive to see that, oh, this person is trying to be negative, to paint negative picture about our findings. So it's very important that these power dynamics and relations are clearly sorted out so that you don't create problems. You don't become unethical in the way you are doing your M&E process. So don't forget, when you talk about ethics and challenges, we are looking at it from two sides of the coin. From you as an M&E expert, what are some of the ethical considerations that you need to take into consideration? From the context of the project itself, are there ethical considerations that they applied in the process? So these two sides of the coin must be carefully handled so that when you bring out your findings, they are findings that are credible and biased, not based on personal accusation. If you differed with somebody, or you are evaluating your former classmate or your ex, that's not what we are evaluating. We are not evaluating your relationship. We are evaluating the work that they did. So even if you had a very difficult relationship, if the results are positive, tick. Do not cross because you had a bad relationship. At the same time, if the results are bad, do not tick, however the relationship. If you cannot do that, declare interest. Declare interest in doing that and give it to an independent person to do an M&E, because one of the key characteristics of an effective monitoring and evaluation is independence. If there's no independence, that is not an M&E you're doing. You're just playing and wasting time and money. Take note of that. So make sure that there is no point where you are actually messing around with power relation, where you're trying to use your position to influence or bulldoze the findings. You know, these things happen, especially for those who are in government. You find that you want to report like this, they say, report like this, because the results must appear to be moving in the positive direction. But that's not correct. I remember in one of the news items I saw in the media was saying Zambia, one of the most deforested areas in the world, countries in the world. I didn't agree with that. But that statement was put in the mouth of a technocrat by a politician so that when the donors hear that, they will bring money. No, that's not how we get money. You need to be ethical in what you're pronouncing. Don't pronounce anything that is unethical or something that really doesn't paint a true picture. The other thing that you need to talk about in terms of ethics is the use of data and the results. How will the results be used? That must be clarified. Now, this again, as I mentioned, should be from the two sides of the coin, both from the M&E expert point of view and the implementer's point of view. If they are collecting information from the local people or the community or grouping where they are doing the implementation, they should be very clear. Did they declare how they will use that information and even keep it? Or they will collect information and start spreading the rumors about the people? That should be taken care of. When you collect data as a researcher, how are you going to use the results? Will you publish some of the findings? And or if you are collecting sensitive information about, let's say, communities or students, teachers, or community members, are there any issues to do with the data privacy? And that's why if you go in some scientific journals, when you're publishing, they'll ask you to declare some data privacy issues. Are there some data that has to be kept private for the sake of the privacy of the people who are involved? Take care of this. Let alone if the project involves the young children, make sure that their confidentiality is at the highest level. Data protection. Don't get that data and start selling it to those who would actually start to publicize. You've heard of these things sometimes on social media. How did people get this information? There's someone who's leaking information, and information leakage is extremely criminal. You can end up being jailed. So make sure that if you're working with research assistants, you also tell them about information protection about the people who are involved in the project. That is going to help you to have a very credible study. And also, last but not the least, the risk of program failure. That is another challenge and ethical issue that has to be taken care of. There are times when you can predict that this project is going to fail, and it brings stigmatization. Sometimes people talk to stigmatize, to speak evil against what you're doing. Let not that derail you if you know exactly what you're doing. So if a project is being evaluated as or tagged as failing, usually they stigmatize, they talk, and especially those who thought maybe you sideline them in the project. They want to go all over the place to spread rumors and exaggerate everything. But don't forget, if you have the findings and based on the key indicators, key deliverables, milestones of your project, present those. Don't worry about those who go around to stigmatize and speak evil. But that's one of the major fears that every project implementer has, to say, what if it fails? There's stigma that comes, bad name and or name damaging. You need to be aware of that. Sometimes, as I mentioned to you, there are people who perhaps were competitors. If, for example, you bid in this bidding business, you want to learn something. When you're bidding, those who are awarding, in most, if not all cases, always have someone they prefer. That's a reality. They always have someone they prefer. So if they find that there's another assessor who has awarded that to another person, you may find that they may even create a scandal for you, publicizing on the social media, and it's all over. And before you control the damage, it's all over the place. But if you go to the ground, you find it's not true. It's not true. So beware of that. Sometimes the people can tarnish your name to cause so much damage about your project and very people who are closer to you. So you need to guard yourself against any labels, stigmatization, and those people may cause the project to fail. There are people who want to join you and wish that it should fail. The project must fail. Be alert to those, and don't also go with the same motive when you're evaluating. Say, until this fails, if it is me evaluating, this is already a failure. You can't do that. You have to be objective. You have to be unbiased. And then last but not the least, under the risk of program failure is the issue of intervention avoidance. So there are times when stakeholders may avoid intervention or changes based on the results of an evaluation due to the stigma or negative attention that failure might bring. Even when those results are an opportunity for employment, I've already told you that failure is not always a bad thing. You can learn some lessons. But how can you avoid all these, especially the issues of ethical challenges? So the first thing is make sure that there's inclusivity and that the use of participatory approaches in all stages, at all stages of your project, try to make it as participatory. Of course, there are people who may drag you down, but try as far as possible to make your project as participatory as possible, ensuring that the project feedbacks, the community feedbacks, are being harnessed and worked upon or acted upon, so that people say, oh, this is what we suggested, it is working. And then you find that they're going to have a very positive energy towards what you're doing. And make sure that you develop ethical frameworks. Develop ethical frameworks and guidelines upfront. What guidelines will be there to govern the day-to-day operations of the project? Make sure that you continually monitor. That's why we have what we call formative evaluation, is to provide checks and balances along the way to make sure that you don't make a mistake along the way and then you only realize at the end of the implementation. So these are some of the few strategies, but you may actually already be involved in these things that you can actually amplify the discussion. I'll be very happy to engage with you to discuss further when we meet physically or online, to reflect upon these few points that I've shared. So I was looking at topic number 2 in your course outline. Thank you and God bless.